The key to mastering NLP and uncovering the truth of who you are lies beyond the techniques and strategies of Neuro Linguistic Programming itself. When I started attending NLP trainings, I had no idea that having a background in an Eastern spiritual philosophy would give me an advantage like none other. What I'm going to share with you holds the key to unlocking boundless and limitless potential. In this video, we'll explore what it is and how it can open up new possibilities in your life. So, if you're ready to go beyond the surface level and uncover the ultimate NLP secret, then let's get started. When I took my first NLP training, it was a live in person practitioner training that was about 2.5 weeks long. And most of the people who were attending were from outside of the US. Turns out NLP is very popular outside of the US, probably more so outside of the US than in the US. And I was one of only 2 people from Santa Cruz, which is very strange if you think about it because NLP started in Santa Cruz. One thing that I noticed right away is that I was really taking to the material very quickly, and I was understanding it very quickly, and other people were not. And so I started to wonder, why was this? Why was I taking to this material much faster, whereas some people were really struggling with it, and it almost seemed like they had like a mental block about what they were learning, which was preventing them from really taking it to the level that they needed to in order to be proficient at it. And some people would even start to ask me questions. Well, how are you getting this and I'm not? Like, what are you doing? How are you thinking about this? And I was curious about that too. So I started asking them questions. They asked me questions. And I started to figure out very quickly that they made a lot of assumptions about their beliefs and about who they were that they assumed was absolute facts and truth that was unbendable, unchangeable. And to me, I didn't think of it that way. I thought of it as, well, no, that's only beliefs that you have. And those can be changed because your beliefs are not facts. But they feel like it. They feel like it if you don't question them. They feel real. They feel like that is how reality works. And then the beliefs about yourself, you tend to think, well, that's who I am and that's how I am, as if it's something that's unchangeable. What I started to realize is that my understanding of what is called non-duality was an incredible backdrop for me before beginning to learn NLP. And the truth is, I would say it's an incredible backdrop to learn any sort of mental technology where you have to question and understand that you're creating reality. It's coming through you. Now that when you hear me say that, that you might go, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And that's exactly what these people were struggling with in these NLP trainings. And I had already worked through that. I didn't have any special talent. I didn't understand that from birth. One could maybe make the argument that that's the only thing that you understand at birth is that your non-dual reality, and that duality is an illusion. And then we forget that and we become human beings with personalities, and those personalities then dictate our limitations. And we forget about our non-dual awareness. And then later in life, if you decide to take this up, then you start questioning that. And you start to find some very, very interesting things. A lot of what you thought to be absolute truths fall away, and you discover that they're not. You discover that there's a lot more flexibility in what we call reality and in yourself. So I had spent a considerable amount of time, years, studying non-duality, and I even had a non-duality teacher who I spent time with and even he lived here in Santa Cruz. So when I moved up here, he was already mentoring me. And when I moved up here, I was able to spend more time with him. And what non-duality is first of all, it's really hard to define. And I actually started looking up definitions. I'm not always great at putting things into words, especially something that seems very abstract. And I couldn't find any good definitions. So we're going to kind of wing it here. And non-duality is basically your awareness that you are not separate from anything else. If something is in your awareness, you and that is one and the same, because you are your awareness. You're not your beliefs. You're not your body. You're not your possessions or anything that you feel like you own. You are essentially that awareness that is aware of your beliefs, that is aware of your possessions and your physical attributes. And in that awareness, anything in that awareness is not separate from who you are, from what you are. Awareness itself is your essence. So anything in your awareness is also part of your essence. And you can really meditate for a very long time on that and question any assumptions or beliefs you have about who you are. And the more you do this, the more it will fall away. Now, one of the things that I teach that I think definitely came from my non-duality background that I think is easier to grasp, and that is you have never experienced a beginning nor an end. And when I tell people that, they go, well, what do you mean? I've experienced plenty of beginnings and plenty of endings. You know, you go to a movie, and the movie starts, and then the movie ends, and then you leave the movie theater and you come back home. Experience is over. It began and it ended. I started school at, whatever grade, whatever semester, and then the semester ended, and then that was over, right? Experience itself is subjective. There's nothing objective about experience. Now, we'll never truly know objective reality. That's the endeavor of science, right? That's science's highest ideal, is to find objective truths. And I'm glad we have that. Science is amazing. But in science as well, we also know that we're never going to fully have complete truth, complete objective truth. But that's the ideal that it's aspiring to. And along the way, science discovers amazing things that are amazingly useful. Sometimes they're not so useful, but they're just amazing to contemplate, like things that we find out in the universe. Just mind-blowing to think about. And right now they might not be useful to us, and they may never be useful to us, but at some point maybe they will. But it's absolutely worth it, I feel, to study these things. I also think it's absolutely worth it to study subjectivity, which is what NLP is. Neuro Linguistic Programming is the study of the structure of subjectivity. Bandler once said, I think it's the study of the structure of subjective experience. But again, experience itself is subjective. Because experiences have a beginning and an end, right away that's our subjectivity that we're imposing on reality. Because all you've really known is one continuous stream of consciousness. You don't remember being born, and you were too young to even construct what we now call an experience. Like now we're good at it. As adults, we mark out a beginning, we mark out an end to an experience, and we say, okay, this is XYZ experience. We categorize it. This is how we make meaning of life. This is how we organize information and make meaning of it. And by the way, you are a meaning-making machine. That is what we do as humans. We're so good at it, and we're doing it constantly. We need to understand the world, and how we do that is impose our meanings on it. And are we right or are we wrong? No one can ever answer that, because we'll never know absolute truth. But we can help ourselves by organizing information into what we call experiences and then selecting and collecting those experiences into what we call generalizations. And the idea behind this, and NLP especially, is to understand how we do this so we can make this the most useful lies that we can make up about ourselves and about the world. I know that you might have heard lies. Wait a minute, this doesn't sound good. Maybe a better word would be better to use for a connotation, more positive connotation. And that is, we're constantly making meanings, and we'll never know if these meanings are absolutely correct. But if we're going to do this anyway, which we are, we might as well make the best meanings that we possibly can about our lives and about the world around us that are the most useful and bring us the most rewarding and fulfilling experiences that we can have. Where does non-duality come in to all of this? Well, it's coming from that non-dual awareness that allows you to really understand this and not get so caught up in the illusions that we create so that we can change them. So just by having that basic understanding that an experience has a beginning and middle and an end, and your life has not, you should start to see the separation between the two. So we know that you were born. So you might say, well, I know that I had a beginning. I was born. I'm here. And I agree with you. But you don't have an experience of that beginning. It was suddenly awareness turned on in your being, in your body. And in a sense, it's almost as if that awareness existed before, and suddenly it became a part of the flesh that you inhabit now. So we don't know if the awareness had any sort of beginning. We know that it had a beginning of the time that that awareness breathed life into you, but you don't remember that. So you have never experienced a beginning. And because you're listening to this right now, I can assure you, you have not experienced an ending because you're still alive. So your life has been one continuous stream of consciousness. And during that stream of consciousness, you have learned to select and collect and sort information in such a way to help you understand what's going on around you better, and then to make meaningful experiences and to make meaning of your life and to make meaning of your existence. When you understand that, a million and more, many millions of possibilities can open up from there. You feel less limited. In fact, you might get to a place of not feeling any limitation at all, because there are so many possibilities when you truly understand that your awareness is non-dual. You are not separate from what you perceive around you. You're all one and the same. Now, when I was being taught non-duality and I was studying it, really trying to get to that truth that I'm not my beliefs, that I'm not separate from anything that I perceive. And I went really deep with this. And at a certain point, I went to my teacher and I said, okay, here's my understanding of this. And if you want to know who my teacher was, I'll tell you at the end. You might have to remind me, though. So I came to him and I said, here's my understanding of this. I don't believe that my understanding goes as deep as yours, because this guy really had this down. And he said, I think so. I think, but I think you're very clear. You see, you're on that path to understanding this really, really well. Just keep going with it. And I said, yeah, but you know what? I'm broke, and I have a family to support. Can this help me do that? Can I fix these problems? And he said, well, when you pull the plug on this whole idea of, a self and all these beliefs, he said it usually frees up a lot of energy for you. And when you realize that you don't really have any problems, they become easier to solve. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can agree with all that. But I felt rather empty. And yes, I was not suffering nearly as much as I did before, because that's what creates that suffering, that turning away from the truth of who you are and seeing yourself as being separate. There's always pain involved in that. because it has a feeling of separateness and aloneness, and that's just not the truth of who you are. And anytime you turn away from the truth of who you are, it creates suffering. So suffering a lot less, but I still needed to make money. I still needed to support my family, and I was struggling with this. And his telling me, as you free up the suffering and that energy can go to bigger and better things and to solving these problems for you, that wasn't enough for me. And that's why I turned to NLP. I needed practical solutions for navigating this ocean we call subjective experience in the world around me. Now, we can sit around and say, well, the economy is not real and government's not real. And sure, we can make incredible arguments for all of those things, but we still have to function in the reality of a world that all of us are creating together that has certain pitfalls and traps. And there are things that can get in our way and that can make us physically suffer more. So we have to navigate in the world. We can't just meditate on our non-dual awareness all day long and feel good about that. Nobody's going to pay you to do that. And while that puts you in a place to solve a lot of problems, it doesn't necessarily solve them for you. So I got to a place where I was very satisfied in my understanding of non-duality. And then realizing this is really, to try to go further into this was not going to really get me where I wanted to be, which was happy and fulfilled because of being really active and engaged in my life, and also being able to support my family and having money as a resource to do the things that I want to do, and freedom from having to work a straight like 9 to 5 job and having a boss. These were things that were getting in the way of me enjoying my life, even if I understood that I was the non-dual awareness and I wasn't separate from everything or anything. So when I went to NLP training in order to learn how to sort of navigate the subjective experience and how to understand its structure so that I could restructure it, that backdrop of non-duality understanding, non-dual awareness made understanding that so much easier, because when you can understand that your problems aren't really real, when you can understand that your experiences aren't really real, they become so much easier to change them. But when you believe that they are absolute facts of reality, then they feel like these solid brick walls that you cannot walk through. And that feels very limiting. So it might sound a bit contradictory when I talk about the self-concept model and self-concept. And when I say, well, what is your self-concept? And your self-concept is you take your experiences and you select and collect them and categorize them into a generalization. And when they have to do with who you are, that's a generalization about you. And so we call that a quality. And then when you generalize all of your qualities together, both positive and negative, you get what we call the self-concept, the sense of self. And then here I am telling you that that's not what you actually are. So it sounds paradoxical. But Steve understood this too. Steve Andreas, my mentor who created the self-concept model. He understood that you could change this. And if you could change this, then this could not be the immovable fact of who you are, because it can be changed. And that's the basis of the self-concept model, is that you can change your beliefs about yourself, which then changes your self-concept. So if you understand this, both of those, non-dual awareness and self-concept, you understand that they fit together perfectly. And in fact, when I said that what we believe, these generalizations are lies, I actually took that directly as a direct quote from my teacher, Steve Andreas, who created the self-concept model. He said the same thing: you will never know the absolute truth. So we create lies about the world, about ourselves, and we can't not do this. This is the only way we can navigate the world, because we can't know absolute truth. So the question then becomes, How useful of a lie can you create? How useful and accurate and resourceful of a lie can you create that's going to support your life and you and help you support the people you care about the most? And so I don't think that non-duality and NLP oppose each other. I think they acknowledge each other. And I think most people in NLP don't study non-duality, and I think most people in non-duality don't study NLP. I was one of those rare combinations, but it's a really good combination. And I recommend that if you've studied NLP, that you also study non-duality and vice versa. So the truth of who you are is awareness, and in that awareness, everything is one, not separate from anything else. That's non-duality. NLP is I understand that I have to take in this information, organize this information, and make use of it and meaning of it. Because if I don't, then I can't function in a society. I can't function in this world. So I have to go along with the assumptions of others and the assumptions of myself, of who I am, living in a world where I must work to make money, to pay bills, to pay taxes, to support my family. I must abide by the laws. All those laws are built upon assumptions, and the government itself are all built on assumptions. And there's nothing wrong or bad about any of that. But it's amazing when you can acknowledge that all of this is built on assumptions based on what we feel is right, what we feel is good, what we feel is useful. And therefore, over time, we evolve, governments evolve, societies and cultures evolve. And these are all beautiful things to be celebrated. I'm not putting any of it down because it's like not real, because it's not, when we think about our non-dual awareness. No, this it all is one. It's all part of everything. The non-duality, the understanding of the non-duality is like in the Matrix, whenever they were stepping out of the Matrix. And they were like, okay, we can understand that this is, the Matrix is not real. But when you're in the Matrix, you are subject to the rules and the laws, but they can be bent, right? If you've seen those movies, they're wonderful movies. And if you die in the Matrix, you die in real life. So there's real consequences, even though it's made up. And that's what we're talking about here. So you have non-duality and you have NLP, and they fit really well together. And you can think of NLP as like the code to the Matrix. Non-duality is being able to step out of the Matrix and have that awareness that it is in fact made up. But even though it's made up, it has real world consequences and it feels real. When you believe something, that means that's your reality. And you will abide by that. The wonderful thing is if that belief is not working for you and it's not giving you what you want, you can change that belief so that it does. At the same time, there's some guidelines you're going to want to follow, like making sure that that belief is an accurate one. At least it's rooted and based in some reality and some objective reality that we can get our hands around. And that's really important because I don't want anybody to think that what I'm saying here is you can just believe whatever you want. If you want to believe that you're invincible and you can fly up into the sky and by flapping your arms, and no, I'm not saying any of those things. And this is why NLP is so powerful and why it's so important, is because it gives you that code to write your generalizations, to write your beliefs, to write the meanings that you want to make of life. And it also gives you lots of suggestions in order to make it stable and good and healthy for you. And that is one of the amazing things about the self-concept model is how much Steve, when creating it, built in all of the safety structures and the groundingness into that model so that people wouldn't become arrogant or uh, overly cocky and think of themselves as being better than what they are. It was built all of it's built into being very, very stable and very connected to who you are and connected to other people and not trying to be superior to anyone. All right. So, if you want to learn NLP, and if you're already in the process of learning NLP, and you want to add a tremendous benefit or a tremendous accelerator to your learning, I recommend that you start checking out Non-Duality. Now, you might be wondering uh, authors and people I would recommend. So, I think people like Eckhart Tolle and J. Krishnamurti are really good for beginning, but you don't want to stay there. They really those two kind of stay. I don't want to say at the surface, but they're you can take it much deeper, and I recommend that you do. Now, there's a book called "I Am That" by Nisargadatta Maharaj. It's not the best book I found because it was translated from talks that he gave. He never sat down and wrote anything. He was an Indian non-dualist who died, I think, in the early '80s. But so they have a lot of his. They have transcribed a lot of his talks, and then it was translated. I guess he was speaking Hindi. I'm not sure, but it was transcribed into English. And so he also uses a lot of. Well, I want to say what it was he studied, but the religion, but I'm probably going to say it wrong. Aveda Vedanta. He uses a lot of those terms, and so if you're not familiar with those terms, it can be very difficult to understand. My teacher, my direct teacher, John Wheeler, he wrote a few books on non-duality. He would surface from time to time, and then he would disappear. And then the last time I talked to him was about 2 years ago. He was leaving Santa Cruz, and he had taken down all of his stuff, and his books went out of print. They might be back in print, but for a time, his books went out of print. He had felt like he had said everything that he wanted to say. He was also his health was not good, and last I knew, he was moving away. And I tried to reach out to him recently, and he changed his email address, so I haven't been able to find him. But you can find him on YouTube, not his own channel, but people have posted videos of him. And for me, he made it very clear, and he was a direct in the direct lineage of Nisargadatta Maharaj, because his teacher, who was named Sailor Bob, who I think is still alive, he's from Australia. He had been a direct follower of Nisargadatta Maharaj, and it was Sailor Bob who taught John, and so he comes through that lineage. And John just had a very good way of explaining this stuff and making it very, very clear. In fact, he was a copywriter here in Silicon Valley for a while, and I think that really helped him write. He could write very clearly. So anyway, if you can find any of his books, I highly recommend them. So books like Shining in Plain Sight and The Light Behind Consciousness. And if you are into non-duality, which I'm sure most people came to this video because of NLP first, but if you are into non-duality and you haven't studied NLP, I highly recommend studying NLP, because then it's like giving you the compass and the ability to sort of write the code of your life, which is extraordinary if you think about it. And it has affected my life in the most extraordinary ways. So in conclusion, knowing where the truth of who you are lies is not only the home you can always go back to, it's the home you never left and never will. It has no beginning and no end. You're experiencing it temporarily through your body, but its potential is boundless. You are that. Okay. I'm going to go back, see if there's any questions. And by the way, I had asked John Wheeler to come on my YouTube channel years ago before he left, and he declined. And it's just kind of who he is. Is this where we learn to be like Bradley Cooper in the movie Limitless? I think I already answered that. Okay. I did enjoy that movie though. Wouldn't it be great to have something like that? A lot of this reminds me of Dizogen. Yeah, I'm familiar with that term, you will find non-duality as part of Buddhism, Hinduism, pretty much almost all of the major Eastern philosophies and religions. At its core, you will find non-duality in the core of it. All right, let's see what else. I come from a non-duality background. I think it's helping a lot with this work. Good. You are the wholeness of everything and everyone. Sure. That's another way of putting it. There is only now. Yes. Wasn't expecting a non-dual class today. Yeah. People tend to like it though. I have done a few videos on non-duality. People tend to do well. What about that guy who wrote the book, The Autobiography of a Yogi? He remembered everything. I didn't read the book, so I can't really comment on it. Science is only a study of what has already been created. Science cannot study the matters of unseen. Science should be taken as is with its limitations. I agree. I'm not an anti-science person, though. I think science is wonderful. I'm so glad we have what we call science. This is music to my ears. I was hardcore non-duality seeker for years, but kind of abandoned myself on a 3D level. Yeah, I know the feeling. The outer world is always changing, which by definition means that it's not real. Wayne Dyer. Yeah, I got to see Wayne Dyer give a talk one time in LA. Interesting. This is great. Okay, does quantum entanglement have any place in NLP? You'd have to tell me what that is, because I'm not sure. Dalai Lama said the purpose of life is to be happy and useful. Don't disagree with that. That's pretty broad. It leaves it open to a lot of interpretation. The assumptions we agree upon to create consensus reality is literally magic. These are ideas that create reality, and even though we create them, they can control effectives. I agree with that. Damon, now I understand why we met, at least virtually at this point. You have mentioned Krishnamurti, non-duality, and having freedom as a highest value on several occasions, leading to self-concept. Interesting. The name of the teacher. Okay, yeah, I gave that. Send out a list in your email newsletter of good books on the subject, please. That's a good idea. Robert Spira is also very good. Haven't read him. Advaita Vedanta. Yes. The physicist, John Wheeler. No. Okay, that he gets confused a lot. Yeah. Not the physicist or the mathematician John Wheeler. This is a different John Wheeler. In fact, you're going to have a hard time. I think I just saw that somebody created a website for John Wheeler, but he says in the front, like right from the beginning, this is not John Wheeler's website. John Wheeler, is not present on the internet, I guess, so to speak. And that is the John Wheeler I'm talking about. But no, the John Wheeler, the physicist, I think he died years ago. As far as I know, John Wheeler, my teacher, is still alive. Just haven't been able to find him. Let's see. Do you practice Qigong? But no, I don't. Thoughts on the Tao? I've dabbled in Taoism a little bit, and I thought it was interesting. I didn't spend a lot of time with it. Try the I Am meditation. Yeah, I did that for a long time. Great meditation book, The Mind Illuminated. Never read it. Chat GPT has a great explanation of it. Oh, yeah, I don't even know why I didn't think to look up Chat GPT on non-duality. Let's see, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sifuism, they all believe in creator and creating being one. Islam teaches creator and creation are separate. Tell you what, while I'm here, why don't I do that? Why don't I go into Chat GPT and look up what it says as far as non-duality. All right, this is the first time for a live where I do this. Let's see. All right. So, according to ChatGPT, non-duality is a concept that refers to the idea that there is no fundamental separation or duality between the individual self and the wider world. It suggests that all apparent distinctions or boundaries between the self and the universe are ultimately illusory, and that all things are interconnected and ultimately one. Non-dual teachings can be found in various spiritual and philosophical traditions, including Advaita Vedanta, Zen Buddhism, and Taoism. These teachings often emphasize the importance of realizing one's true nature, which is said to be beyond the limitations of the ego or individual self. The goal is to move beyond dualistic thinking and to experience a state of unity or oneness with all things. In practical terms, non-duality can be understood as a shift in perspective that allows for a more profound and holistic understanding of reality. It can involve practices such as meditation, self inquiry, and contemplation, as well as the study of non dual teachings and texts. Wow. Uh, they did put it together very concisely in ChatGPT. Too long to post, yeah. Um, but I hope that what I've explained here today was sort of an expansion of what I just read from ChatGPT. ChatGPT was able to concisely put it together into 3 paragraphs, and I find that, I agree with what was written in there, and I hope that you feel like I've given you an expansion on, um, the simpler terms and conciseness that you can find as a definition from ChatGPT of what non-duality is. It's one of those things that's really hard to explain. It's easier to explain what it's not than what it is. And the deeper you go into it, the more you start to have that feeling of understanding it. So it's not just like a mental understanding that you feel it, a sense of when you're not so separate and divided, that your existence is unified, which is also one of the objectives of doing NLP and especially the self concept model. All right. Thank you for hanging out for this journey into Eastern philosophy and how you can combine it with neuro linguistic programming. I think it's a dynamite combination. It really helped me, like I mentioned when I was training, and other people were struggling with these understandings, and I was like, no, it makes perfect sense to me. These are all just structures that we're creating, representations, and so we can change these things, which is very empowering. See, Al Paul says, John Wheeler books only available used. Sailor Bob's books is available. I think John Wheeler contributed to it. Uh, yeah, I mean, if you can find his used books, I might have lost mine in a fire, unfortunately. I'm gonna try to look for them again, but I was buying all of his books, and actually, in some of John Wheeler's books, they're all based on email exchanges he's had with students or people who were looking to him as a teacher, and it was in his last 2 or 3 books where there are exchanges between him and I, but he doesn't name me, but it was some of my questions that I was having, that he was answering, and then he took that email exchange and put it in his book. Anyway, it's really good stuff. I wish he was still active as a teacher because he was quite amazing in his ability to explain this stuff and make it very, very clear. All right, thank you for hanging out. I really enjoyed this. This is day 10, which means we have 20 more lives to go, 20 more consecutive lives to go. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and doing this all over again. You're welcome.